like you discovered some good things, interesting things about yourself. So keep thinking about it. God will continue to show you what you were born with in your body and those things that have happened to your body later. So it could be diseases that happened later, like I was sharing about mine in my lungs. It could be if you were in a wreck, maybe it cut your arm, maybe it broke your leg, then those things can then affect what job you could do or not do. So it just depends. Okay, so today we are still looking at these 5 life purpose questions. We've looked at allegiance, and we're still here in design about who you are. But we are looking today specifically at your strengths. We looked yesterday at the physical body, so today we're looking at your strengths, your aptitudes, your tests, your talents, the things that you're good at. And then we'll go on and look at these other things later. So again, we're in the big circle. Who am I? Jeremiah 29:11 is still our theme verse because you need to know the plan that God has for you so that you have a future and a hope. So let's look at design strengths. Now, it's very interesting. We were talking yesterday about the body you were born with. Today we're looking at the strengths you were born with, not strengths that have been developed. So if you'll turn to your notes and be sure to put all the words that are underlined there in your notes, because these are words that will help you to also remember the key ideas. So when we're talking about strengths, we're not talking about like your muscle. I was telling Kevin the other day, he's out there chopping and using the panga, and he's building some big muscles. Okay, but that's something Kevin is doing that is building his muscles. We're going to be talking about strengths you don't have to work on, okay? Not initially. So strengths make you naturally good at certain things. So these are natural, or a word you may not have heard is innate. It means it was inside you when you were born, okay? So these are strengths you're born with. This little baby is born with certain strengths. Now, we may not know what those strengths are for a year or 2 or 3 or 10, but they're the natural strengths, the natural talents. Another word we use is aptitudes, okay? So those are the things that you're naturally good at. And for those of you who are older, these are things that you were good at even when you were a little kid. So again, not something you worked on building your muscles, but something that you're just good at, okay? These are areas you might think about something like sports or soccer. Areas where you perform at an exceptional level with little effort. So that means you're better than other people. Maybe not better than everybody. You may not be the best in the whole world, but you're exceptional because whereas other people don't do so well, you do great and you're not even trying. Okay? It's easy for you. It may be a knack for learning or picking up something quickly. Something you're able to learn very quickly. I was working with Jessica yesterday. She was learning one of the computer programs. And I just showed her something quickly and she could do it. I think she does have a knack for the computer. Areas in which it's energizing and satisfying to function. You know, if you're good at something and it's easy for you, and you're better than most other people, then it's fun, right? It's enjoyable because, you know, you're successful, you're doing well, you're performing well, and other people are going, how did you do that? I can't do that. I can't run that fast. I can't think and do that. I'm not good at that language, and you just do it. So again, it's recognized by others. They're the ones saying, how did you do that? Teach me how to do it because I'm not good at that. They're seeing that strength in you. So let's think of some examples. Again, strengths are an important component of life purpose. Why? Well, God not only gave you the body you're going to live in your whole life, but He also put some special things in you. He put some special strengths, some special talents, some special aptitudes in you. So, it might be endurance. It might be, I think we looked at these yesterday, didn't we? Yeah. So the same things we talked about yesterday. It might be endurance. Now, endurance is something you can train and get better at. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But you may naturally have endurance in the beginning. You may have quick reflexes. You can respond quickly. You know, one of the problems with driving a car is that you have to have quick reflexes. If somebody, the bus or a matatu is pulling in, you've got to be able to turn the wheel and hit the brake very quickly. And the problem with older people, especially, although even some young people, is they may not have quick reflexes. And if you don't have quick reflexes, you may be in an accident because you were not able to move quickly. The pleasing singing voice we talked about yesterday. Again, singing lessons is something you could do to make it even better, but we don't get to pick the singing voice that we have, right? Some people go, I just can't sing, you know? And other people have a very nice voice, and they were just born with it. We talked about the fine motor skills of a surgeon, an ear for music. Now, the ear for music especially, you know, some people simply can't hear the music. They can't tell if it's on key. They can't hear the beat of the music. So when they're singing, it's like, whoa, because they're not with everyone else. They can't hear it. And there's nothing really you can do for that. So if they don't have an ear for music, they're not going to be leading worship, and they're not going to be singing in the choir, okay? A knack for foreign languages. Now, I've studied a number of foreign languages. Of course, my mother tongue is English, but I have also studied, I took Russian for 4 years, I think. I've studied Hebrew, and I've studied Greek. Of course, I know Kadogo. Kiswahili, and I've been here 12 years. I am not good with languages. And if you ask me to say something in Russian, I can say about 1 or 2 sentences. Same for Hebrew, and I can't even speak Greek. So I'm not good at languages. I've tried, I've studied them, but I'm not good at it. You guys, some of you already know like 3 languages. Your mother tongue may be Kalenjin,
Yes.
and then you've learned Kiswahili and English, and you speak all of them. All of them. Now, Les is much better at languages than I am, but you guys are smart. And that is a real advantage. That can really help you when you go to get a job. Because if you're in a job where you could speak English, let's say you're working in a store, you could speak English to those customers, you can speak Kiswahili to others, you can speak your mother tongue. Maybe you don't fluently speak Luo, but you understand it a little. That's going to help you. That's going to help you. And that's another reason why I've been really encouraging you guys to get really good at English, because English is more the international language that depending on what job you're in, you need to speak good English. More and more here in Kenya. The ability to visualize things in 3D. You know, many people think of a house, or if they were going to draw a picture of that window, they would think of it as a flat surface. But some people think of everything in 3D. They picture the length, the width, the depth of it. They can picture. Well, if you're going to be an architect, you better be able to picture it in 3D, or you're not going to do good in architecture. Think about, we talked about Mercy and Jerry a little bit yesterday, but think about being a baker or a chef. What skills do you need to be able to have? If you're going to be, let's just take them one at a time. What about baking? If you're going to be a baker, what do you need to be good at? We talked about taste, right? Yeah. Mercy better be able to taste and know that, ooh, it has too much salt. Oh, it doesn't have enough sugar, right? Anything else you can think of? Huh?
Calculation.
I can't hear you.
Calculation.
Yes, calculations. She has to do a lot with math and calculations in the recipes and the measuring. Not just calculating them, but measuring them. Some of you have helped me in baking. You know, you better weigh it right. You better level off that cup or that teaspoon so you're getting the right amount. Yeah. Now, she's also got creativity. When it comes to decorating the cakes, she's creative. What about Jerry? What about being a chef? What kind of strengths do you think Jerry has?
I think good eye contact to observe what he's doing.
Okay, yeah, he's very careful, isn't he? He has to be able to look at the vegetables, look at the meat, see if they're good or if any part's ruined. He too has to be able to taste it correctly, follow instructions. He does a lot of calculations too with the cooking. Both of them are very precise. I admit, I'm not. I'm a sloppy cook and a sloppy baker. I kind of just throw some in and put a little more and I spill it everywhere. And so, but they are very careful. So it's just right. Okay, let's look at some other things. What about a dancer? You know, dancing is an ability that many people have when they're born. I shared with you, I'm not a very good dancer now because I'm too old, but I used to do a lot with dance. I learned ballet and tap, modern dance, ballroom dancing, worship dancing, folk dancing. So I've done probably 6 different kinds of dance. So what do you have to, what strengths do you have, do you think, to be a good dancer?
Flexible.
Flexible. sense of rhythm, being able to follow directions. Dr. Les cannot dance. I remember this one time we were on vacation, and at the place we were staying, they were going to do some free country line dancing. Have you heard of country line dancing that the cowboys and cowgirls do? Okay, so he had on his big cowboy boots, and every time we were supposed to go this way, he went this way. And when you were supposed to kick this way, he kicked that way and kicked the person who was next. So he had a real problem. However, I will say that just a few years ago when we lived here in Nairobi, we took not tango. Gosh, now I can't even think what were we taking? Rumba. We were taking rumba lessons, and he did very well. But it was hard for him. We'll just say he's not a natural. He had to work very hard. What else for dance? There's a lot of creativity. I don't know. Okay, what about an artist? What can you think about somebody who's an artist? Whether they're going to paint, maybe there's a lot of different kinds of art, right?
Creativity.
Yes, creativity is the main thing, right? Because they might be painting with oils, they might be painting with watercolors, they might be drawing with charcoal or pencil, they might be doing sculpting or making statues. I mean, there's all kinds of art, right? Even interior design in a home is using colors and design and fabrics. And so you're doing art. So that person has a real eye for color and shapes and the creativity. It's like they can see it in their mind and then they're able to make it. What about music? What about a musician? Whether you're playing a guitar, a piano, or drums, or whatever instrument you're playing, what could you say about a musician? What kind of strengths do they have?
I think the first is we need to have that flexible hand.
Yeah, they've got to be able to use their hands. Well, depending on which instrument, almost any instrument they need to use their hands because they've got to be playing keys or playing or strumming the guitar or something. Now, some instruments, if it's a wind instrument, then they've got to be able to also blow with their mouth. You know, you guys have probably noticed that we have those two horns up there on the wall, and those are called shofars. There's a ram's horn, those are ram's horns. And in Israel, the priests and the military would blow the shofar. I want you guys to try to blow one of those. Let me tell you what, we talked yesterday about how I have strong lungs. I can blow hard. I can't make any sound come out of those. You have to really be able to blow. So if you're playing a wind instrument, you've got to have air, you've got to have the right kind of lips, and use the fingers too. What else? Beat, keeping a beat, having a natural sense of rhythm. Of course, now some musicians are able to read music, which is an important skill, and it's not easy either. So learning all the music notes, all the timing, all the different symbols on music sheets it's hard to learn. But that is something that anybody could learn. But some musicians have a natural, inborn ability to just hear something played and they can play it. That is beyond me. I studied I studied piano for 6 years and I still can't play it. But my son Caleb, he could hear something played and just play. That is an amazing gift. That's a real inborn talent. And if you can do both, read the music and play by ear, you can really be a great musician. What about an entertainer? An entertainer. Now, there's lots of different kinds. There are lots of different kinds of entertainers. Some are on TV, some are in movies, some are serious actors, some are comedians. So there's a lot of different kinds of entertainers. But what would you say about an entertainer? What kind of strengths do they usually have?
You need to be a good dramatizer.
Okay, they've got to be dramatic. They've got to be able to express emotions, either to make you laugh or to make you cry, to tell the story. Yes, they have to have the ability to dramatize. Most of them are not afraid to be up front. You know, not afraid to be up front, maybe on a podium or in front of a camera. Although there are some movie stars though that I've heard that they were terrified of getting up in front of people, but they did it anyway. But most entertainers like people, they want to entertain people, and they aren't afraid to get up in front of others. Anything else you can think of about an entertainer? Well, keep thinking about it. What about a political leader? What kind of strengths do you have to have if you're going to be like president or MP or a governor? What kind of skills do you need?
Brave.
Huh?
Brave.
You have to be brave, yeah. Yeah, you better be brave. You may get killed. And you've got to be willing to lead. You have to be brave because you have to have the courage to lead people, right? You're a leader. What other skills do they have?
Working.
Hardworking. Did you say hardworking? Yeah. They're gonna, of course, you know, any of these people to be successful, they're all gonna have to be hardworking. That's more something we can choose to do than something we're born with. Hard work is something we all can choose to do, whatever kind of job we have. What about speaking well? They have to be able to speak well, don't they? If you're going to give speeches, if you're going to get elected, if you're going to give speeches, say in Parliament or on TV, you've got to be a good speaker. I don't know of any politician who's done well if they were just quiet. Right? No, people follow them because of what they say and the ideas they share. And so they want to follow them. They want to see this person have power to do those things that they talk about. Okay, what about being a lawyer or especially a chief justice? What if you were on the Supreme Court here in Kenya? What would you have to be good at? What strengths do you think that chief justice has?
Can we say like negotiating, being able to represent what you want to say?
Exactly, yes. Yes, they talk, but in a different way, right? They have to have a skill of talking, but not like the entertainer, and not even like the politician. Because a lawyer has to be able to debate and argue and present that case you're talking about. Be able to argue their points. And let me tell you what, you better be really, really smart. You have to have really, really high grades to go to law school because It's like they have to memorize all the laws. They memorize all the law cases that have ever happened. They have to know the law inside and out. I mean, there's whole libraries of books they have to have read and remember all of it. So you have to be very, very smart to be a lawyer. I think it's almost harder than being a doctor. I don't know, but those two are you have to have the highest grades to go to university to study because of everything you have to know and remember. Okay, what about being a general or a soldier? Let's talk about the soldier first. What kind of strengths would you need to have as a soldier?
Perseverance.
Perseverance, yes. One of my sons, Aaron, was a soldier. And you are going to get a workout. I mean, you better be strong, not just physically, but like Kevin is saying, being able to persevere, to keep going, because people's lives are going to depend on you. You can't quit when you get tired. You can't stop when you're hungry. They don't stop for anything. Well, what would be the difference then between a regular soldier and somebody who got to be general? What kind of skills did this soldier have so that he became a general? What do you think some of his strengths were?
Being able to lead by example.
Okay, leading by example, that's a big one. What else?
Can you say being serious?
Being what?
Serious.
Being serious, yeah, he definitely, I mean, because the soldier is protecting people's lives. But the general, I mean, he's not only trying to save the lives of the people in the country, but he has to try to save the lives of the soldiers. He better be serious. Everybody's depending on him. He's got to be able to think strategically, right? The soldier, they don't want you to think. They do not want you to think. You just obey orders. If they tell you go to that way, you just go that way. If they tell you to go up the hill, you just go up the hill. If they tell you to shoot everybody you see, you just shoot everybody you see. But the general, he's having to plan. He's having to plan the battles. He's having to plan where to send the soldiers. So he better have a good brain for strategy, right? Okay, there's other things, but we're just listing a few. What about a pilot? Here's a guy, he's up there flying an airplane. What does he have to be good at?
I think is that you talk about having good eyes.
Yes, they have to have very good eyesight.
Yeah.
What else? They go through a lot of training. And of course, it depends on what kind of pilot, I suppose. They have to also be very smart because they have to learn all those dials. There's many things they're having to watch in the airplane for altitude and for fuel and for air pressure and all those things. And if one of the dials starts to go wrong, they have to know what to do or the plane will crash. And the plane will be lost, they may be killed, and if they're flying a plane that has many people on it, like an airline pilot, again, they're responsible for a lot of lives, right? So they better know what they're doing. They have to have really good balance. Do you know that there's little tiny bones in your ears that control your balance? It's called your middle ear. And most of the time, like you guys, you're all fine. Yours work. Mine doesn't. They would never let me fly an airplane. Because your middle ear, if it's fine, then it keeps you in balance. You know you're standing up straight. If somebody pushes you, you know you're leaning over, and you know you can tell how much you need to straighten up. because it's balancing you. If you get a sickness, sometimes you can get an ear infection or some other sickness that goes in your ear and affects your balance. And when that happens, then you're very dizzy and you can't tell if you're up or down. Mine started when I was in a bad car wreck. 17 years ago. 17 years ago, I think I've shared with you guys, I was in a car and it rolled over and over and over. And when it did that, there's like little crystals in that middle ear and mine got messed up. And so now sometimes, even though it's 17 years later, if I just turn my head a certain way, they will spill again. And when that happens, I feel like the room is going round and round, and I can't tell if I'm laying down or if I'm standing up. I can't tell. And sometimes you may see that, like I hold on to the rail of the stairs because that helps me to know I'm standing up. Sometimes I don't know if I'm standing up straight or not because I may feel like I'm falling over because of that. So that's something that if a pilot had that, oh, he would not be allowed to fly because he wouldn't be able to tell which way the plane was going. So all these little things make a difference. What about being a pastor? What strengths do you think a pastor has?
Courageous.
Yeah, there's a lot of his spirit, right? He's just his own spiritual. He's got to have his own heart right with God, in his own spirit. But besides the spiritual, what, just again, natural abilities do you think usually a pastor has? Well, I think usually, again, a pastor is another one that because of preaching sermons and praying, usually he's a good talker. He's a communicator. However, not always. Again, I'll use Dr. Les as an example. And I'm not saying anything silly about him that would embarrass him. He says this about himself. That in his own personality and in the way he was living his own life, he was like you guys. He was very quiet. He never talked. And he would have never gotten up and preached a sermon in front of people. But this goes back to what Kevin said. When he got saved and God called him to be a pastor, then God gave him the ability to speak, but it was not natural. It was not natural for him. I think we could say it's natural for me to be a talker, to be a teacher, to preach. I also have the kind of personality being an extrovert. I like being with people, talking with people, ministering to people, but he did not. So that came from the Spirit. With him, it was not natural. It came by the Holy Spirit. For me, it was more natural. Okay. Well, we've got some others. We've talked about musicians, but what about singing? And let's talk about some differences, okay? Because there is a difference of different kinds of music. You could be a singer, but here's some different kinds of singers. So let's talk about that. What if you're just a singer? You're just, you are a singer, maybe just singing at home, or maybe singing in the choir. What kind of strength would you have to, let's say, sing in a choir?
To me, I think you need to be confident.
Okay, there needs to be some confidence. What else?
That good rhythm.
Okay, the good voice, good rhythm. Now, what's the difference between being a singer in the choir and being a worshiper? A worshiper at home, a worshiper who's just sitting out in the chairs at church. What would you say about a worshiper? Do you have to have a good sense of rhythm to be a worshiper? No. Do you have to even have a good voice to be a worshiper? No. Because worship is coming from our heart. It's not coming from our voice, right? God is the one listening to a worshiper. So the good news for all of you is even if you can't sing good, you can still be a worshiper because God is the one listening to you and He just wants to hear your voice praising Him. Okay. What about being on the worship team? What would you say? Now, this is not even being in the choir. This is being on the worship team where maybe just 1 or 2 or 3 people have a microphone. What would you say about their voice? What strengths would they need to have?
I think they should be creative in order to balance the voices.
Okay, that's right. They have to not only have a good voice, they have to have the ear to balance the voices. That's a whole nother skill. That is a whole nother skill of being able to both hear and sing the balance. Because everyone doesn't sing the same notes. Especially in a worship team or in a musical group, you have somebody singing the melody, you have somebody else singing maybe the alto line or the soprano line or the tenor line or the bass line, and when you put all those voices together, that's what Kevin's talking about. There's that balance where their voices are actually coming together and making a chord. And if they don't sing the right note, we say it's discordant because it's wrong note, doesn't match, sounds bad. So they've got to be able to hear that and sing together. Obviously, somebody who's singing with a microphone, they better have a really good voice because they're leading everyone else in music, or if they're just like a singer on the radio, or they're a musician who's on TV or something, who's going to want to listen to them if they don't sound good, right? They've got to have a really good voice. Let me tell you something else about someone who's a soloist or who's on the worship team. It's not just your voice, but you're also leading with your body. So, if the song is talking, you guys may have noticed, if I'm going to worship God, I worship Him with my whole body. So if we're singing about dancing, we're dancing. If we're singing about lifting our hands to the Lord, we're lifting our hands to the Lord. So we're leading by showing you and doing with the body. I've also seen people who are on a worship team, I've seen people who want to be on a worship team. Let's say this is the microphone. And they're up here, and they may have a beautiful voice, but the whole time they're singing, they look like this. It's not good, right? Because you need to be expressive. It goes back to what you were saying about being able to dramatize. And it's not being fake, but it is emoting, it's showing emotions. So that if you're singing about praising the Lord, we ought to be praising Him with a smile too. So we're smiling, we're happy. If it's a more serious song, we may even be crying. We may be kneeling, bowing before Him. So there's more to it than just the voice. What about being a songwriter? Wow, that's a whole different thing, right? If you're going to be a songwriter, again, a songwriter, we were talking about the artist, how the artist kind of sees the picture they want to paint, and then they're able to do it. Well, a songwriter, it's like they hear the song. They hear the song in their mind, and then they're able to write the notes so that anybody can play that song. So there's real creativity, knowing notes, knowing keys, having that's all of that. What about somebody who's a conductor of music? Have you ever seen somebody who's, a conductor of a choir, or especially a conductor of all the instruments? There's clarinets and saxophones and violins, and they're directing it all. What do you think they're really good at?
Creative.
Okay, they've got to be creative.
Good hearing.
Oh yeah, the good hearing, the rhythm. Boy, they can't be off even a fraction because they're the one holding everybody together to the right beat, the right timing with their hands or with the baton they're holding. And so it has to be precise, and they have to have that ear for music, the knowledge of the music, all of that. That's a very hard job. Okay, here's something totally different. What about being a writer? We've talked a lot about music. What about being a writer? What do you have? What strengths does a writer have to have? You have to be good with words, right? So you have to be good with words. You're using words to express your ideas. So the ideas, or maybe the story they want to tell, it's in here, but they're able to communicate with words. They're able to put those words down in a way that tells the story, that helps the reader to understand, that makes you care. That's a real gift. Now, that's something that can be improved, but if you don't have anything to say, if you don't have anything in your mind, if you don't have anything that you're wanting to communicate, then what is there to write about? Now, until recently, writers also had to be really good at things like spelling. Now you can do autocorrect. The computer will help you with your spelling. You better know grammar. You still have to know sentence structure. Be able to say it, whatever language you're writing in. You've still got to be able to put it in a way that people can understand it and that it has power. What about a technician? Now, that technician could be somebody who builds cell phones or refrigerators or cars. I mean, they could be working on anything. But what would they have to be good at if they're going to be doing that?
Knowledge.
Yeah, you've got to know those. You've got to know whatever you're working on. You got to know it inside and out, don't you? What else? You got to be really good with your hands. Really good with your hands. Working on all those little bitty things, knowing how to connect them. You know, John is really good. He's not a technician. He doesn't want to be a technician. He's studying finance. But he is really good. If I had him working on things yesterday, he can fix just about anything. And he's never studied. He hasn't gone to school to be a technician. He's in university studying finance. But he just naturally can work on something and figure it out and know, oh, I bet this is supposed to be there, and I bet those two wires are supposed to be connected, and he can fix it. So you've got to be very skilled with your hands, and it's like your brain has to be wired a certain way to be good at that. Okay, we talked about a doctor and a surgeon yesterday about how they have to know so much about medicine, they have to be good with their hands. Obviously, a doctor who's just checking people would not have to have the same skills as a surgeon. The surgeon is the one who's got to be, let me tell you what, if I have a surgeon, I want him to be really good with his hands because I don't want him cutting the wrong part, okay? I want him to be sure he's cutting what he's supposed to be cutting. And he knows how to put it all back together and sew it up when he's done. When I had surgery on my leg, I think at Nairobi Hospital, I think they thought I was pretty funny, but I was not taking any chances because I had broken this leg and they were going to cut it open to fix the bone, and they had to put a screw in the bones to screw one bone to another bone, and then they had to put in a metal plate that is still in my leg. They had to put that metal plate in there to stay in there to keep my leg the way it's supposed to be. Well, they put you on a cart. Have you ever had surgery in a hospital? No, okay. So they put you on a small bed, that they're wheeling. It's about that big as the table, and it's on rollers, so they can wheel you into surgery. And so I had a gown on. They put the shower cap on your hair to keep, because you don't want to get hair and dirt and anything in where they're going to operate. So, and they take you in there, but then you have like a couple of minutes that you can talk with the doctor and the nurses who are going to be taking care of you before they give you something that puts you to sleep. So you're asleep when they're cutting on you. You don't feel it, you don't know it's happening. When you wake up, it's all done. So, so before they put me asleep, I told them, I said, now, it is this leg. And they said, okay, we know. And I said, well, let me tell you, even in the US, there have been cases where they cut the wrong leg open and then found, oh, that's the wrong leg. So I just want to be sure you cut the right leg. So those kind of things happen. So you want to be sure you have a surgeon that knows what he's doing and he's very careful. They're supposed to ask you, what drugs are you allergic to? Have you ever had surgery before? They're supposed to get the full medical history so that they know if there's a certain kind of medicine you can't have, or if you have a bad heart, or if something else could go. They're supposed to know all that so that accidents don't happen. Now, what about a nurse? Does a nurse have to know as much as a surgeon or even a doctor? No. The nurse is still in the medical field and is still helping to take care of people, but they're taking care of people differently, right? The nurse is the one, and a nurse does not have to be a woman by the way. A lot of men are nurses. A lot of the nurses, even at Nairobi Hospital that I had, were men. So, they're gonna come in, he's taking her blood pressure, they'll come in and check your blood pressure, check your temperature, give you your medicine, check your IV bag, check, depending on what all they're doing to you. They'll change your bed and give you clean gown to wear. And so the nurse is taking care of different things than the doctor's taking care of, which is still different from what the surgeon's taking care of. So they're all in the medical field. And then, of course, there's other people in the medical field who drive the ambulance. Or they're called EMTs, emergency medical technicians. They're the ones who ride in the ambulance and come to a person's house if maybe they've had a heart attack or they're bleeding, and they know how to do quick emergency care. But they're not the doctor. They're not going to be the one taking care of you for a long time. They're not even the one who's like the nurse who's going to take care of you in the hospital. They're giving emergency care, but they're still in the medical field. So they have different skills. So I wanted to show you some of these just to get you thinking, because again, you don't want to have a doctor who has the strengths to be a writer. You don't want a doctor who's a writer. You want a doctor who can doctor you and help you get well. So each career, you're thinking about careers. So as you think about careers, your strengths are going to be big clues about what you're going to be good at in a career. So, in identifying your strengths then, one really important, potent means strong, one potent method for identifying strengths is by reflecting. Just think about your experiences. As long as you've been alive, think about your experiences and begin to make a list of your own strengths. And that's going to be one of the exercises you're going to do. So you're going to do a self-inventory of what do you think you're naturally good at. What do you think you're naturally good at? And then think about areas in which you perform at an exceptional level without trying, okay, without even straining. So look at your successes. What are things that you were really good at in school? It might have been sports, it might have been music, it might have been writing, it might be languages. All the things we've talked about. We've talked about a lot of different kinds of things. But look at your successes. And then when you say, oh, I was successful at singing, okay, what was the strength that was underneath that? It's kind of like a tree. You can see the tree. I was a success at sports. Okay, but now let's look at the roots. Let's look at the roots. What strengths did you have that made the tree, that made the success? So you want to look at what are your strengths that are beneath or underlying. They're the roots that caused you to be a success in those things. So first of all, you can just look at your natural abilities, what you think you're naturally good at. Then, think about those successes. Begin to identify what strengths do you have that made those successes. And then, what do other people say? Again, they're going to give you feedback. What do people say? Wow, Jessica, you're really good at it. Mercy J, you're so good at it. How do you do that? Kevin, I wish I could be like you. How are you so good at that? Because it's easy for us. When you're good at something and you're not even trying, it's natural. You think, well, what's so hard? Isn't everybody good at this? No. So what other people tell you, what they're really telling you is, hey, you may not know it, but you're good at that and other people aren't. I'm not. So by them telling you that, that's giving you some big clues about what you're good at that other people aren't. Then think about this. What's energizing to you? What's fun? What's satisfying? Because again, the things that you do, that you enjoy, that are easy, that you're successful in, well, those are the things that are going to be satisfying to you. They're going to be satisfying. All of these are just different ways of you being able to think and identify your strengths. Because, when we talked yesterday about your body, it's easy for you to not recognize your own body. Why? Well, because you've had that body ever since you were born. And you've just kind of accepted it. I'm a boy. Okay? I'm a boy. What can I do about that? Nothing. Okay. So you're not recognizing, what does that mean? What does that mean that you're a girl? What does that mean that you're a boy? What does that mean that you're tall? What does that mean that you're short? What difference is it going to make if there are some things maybe in your body that are weaker or could be a problem? What difference is that going to make? You have to stop and think about it. And here you're having to stop and think about, what things am I naturally good at? And maybe you never thought about what you're naturally good at because you've always been good at it. So your body can be almost invisible because you've always had it. And your strengths may seem invisible to you because they've just always been your strengths. So that's why I'm giving you some different ways to think about your strengths, to help you to see what you may not have seen before. You see, we're talking about finding puzzle pieces, finding clues to God's will for your life. And some of those are right in front of our face. Some of them may even be our face. But if you don't see it, you need a way to help you to see it. Okay? Now, there can be some limits on functioning in your strengths. I don't want you to be limited. I want you to be able to use your strengths to get a good job, to be successful, to do well. I want you to be able to use those strengths to glorify God because He gave those strengths to you. But sometimes there are limits. Well, one limit is that you can limit yourself by not building on those strengths. It would be like a surgeon who's really good with those fine motor skills, but he doesn't want to use them. He wants to be a writer. But he's not good with words. Well, then he's not going to be building on the right thing. Well, your abilities are less valuable and you will tend to remain in a low influence, or like we call it an entry-level job, if you don't build on your strengths. So if you want a good job, you've got to build on your strengths. If you want to have a successful career, you've got to build on those strengths that God has given you. If you don't, you're going to probably have an average or low-paying kind of job that won't even be satisfying because you're not doing what you're really good at. Okay, here's something else that can limit you. If you don't have credentials. Credentials means a certificate, a diploma, graduating from like a school, a training school. Those things are credentials. Those things say you have been trained. So if you have a lack of education, you have friends who dropped out of school and they haven't even finished Form 4. They're gonna have a very hard time getting any job. Because now Form 4 is considered like the minimum. If you want any job doing anything other than just being a farmer in a shamba up country, you gotta finish Form 4. So if they haven't even known that, it's gonna be a serious limitation. Maybe you have the education, but you haven't gotten any work experience. That's gonna limit you. Or if you haven't gotten a sponsorship. That's why we have worked so hard to see you guys sponsored in school, so that you can finish Form 4. And not just Form 4, but then go on to either university or a training school to get the training that you need. And when you're living here and working, that's giving you work experience. So that when you leave here, we even can write a letter saying how long you worked here, what your skills were, what you were really good at, because that is one of the credentials that will help you to get an even better job. I shared with you, I think, also that, for instance, with Dr. Les, he's been a pastor now for like 48 years. He's very smart, he's very smart. But just after all those years of being a pastor, and then he trained other pastors, and he was an adjunct professor at Regent University, training other pastors and leaders. Those were good credentials. He graduated from university, he had his master's, and then he even had a doctorate. Those are high credentials. But do you know what? God knew that those credentials were not good enough for us to be here in Kenya. Now, we didn't know that. We thought those were like, what more can you have than university masters and doctorate? But God impressed him to get the coach training, then to become a coach trainer, then to take the certification for MBTI and the certification for EQ and MTech and Pearman. And it turned out, like I said, we didn't know this. It turned out that that's how we get to stay in Kenya, because he has the credentials. If he didn't have those credentials, they would say, bye-bye, Britons, go back to US. So it matters. The third thing is you can be limited, you can limit your strengths if you have a lack of character. Now we're going to talk a lot more about character when we talk about preparation. But I'm just going to mention it here, that if there are things inside of you, we're talking your character. It's not even your personality. It's how you act and what you believe. It's what's in your heart. If there are blind spots, things that are wrong with you that you don't see, if you have past failings, like maybe you get into debt, you don't know how to handle money, maybe you've been divorced because you didn't handle your marriage right, it can limit or eliminate choices. If you're caught stealing, they're not going to let you work at the bank anymore. If you're caught stealing, you probably aren't going to get hired by anybody, because nobody wants a thief working for them. So that's a matter of character. That's choices we make. If you're immoral, if you're smoking, drinking, using drugs, people aren't going to want to hire you. You're not going to want to hire somebody who's like, they can't depend on you. They can't trust you. Those are character issues. So they will hurt your chances. They will limit your strengths. And then, of course, there are times when we have an inability to exercise choice. For instance, let's say terrorists came in from Somalia and took over Kenya. And they were destroying businesses, and they were putting Christians in jail. Well, then you have a situation where you have cultural, economic, or political factors where you're living under a foreign government, you're living under a totalitarian regime, you may be living under communism. That's going to limit your options. You may be lucky if you get to stay alive, okay? So obviously in those kind of situations, we're having to trust God just to stay alive and for Him to be our provider, but we're not getting to choose, oh, I'm going to go to that university, or oh, I'm going to study this, because you're in a situation where someone's saying, no, you're not. No, you're not. So we'll talk more about that later. Also, another thing that can limit you being able to function in your strengths is just your life stage. Your life stage. You guys are at the very beginning of adulthood. You are just entering your adult years. You are just learning the very things we're talking about. You're learning about yourself. You're going to learn about your personality. You're learning about your strengths. Tomorrow we'll talk about your weaknesses. We're going to talk about your passions. We're going to talk about how life has prepared you. You're just beginning to learn those things so that you can even work on them. And so the younger you are, the more you may have to take, when you're first working, you may have to take a job you don't want. You may have to take a job that's not your favorite job, not your strength, just because you need money. And you're still maybe studying sewing, maybe working on your skills sewing, but for now, you have to take this other job because you're still young and you don't have the experience. When Dr. Les first began ministry, he got to be the janitor of the church. He was the janitor. He cleaned the toilets. He mopped the floors. He dusted. He did the kind of things Miss Polly does. He didn't get to start being the pastor. He got to start as the janitor. So usually we start low and then God, but Jesus said, if you're faithful in little, I'll give you more, right? So we usually have to start low. So sometimes we start when we're very young and we're not getting to function out of all of our strengths that later we'll get to when we're in our 40s or 50s or 60s. Because as we get older, we have more skills. We have more strengths. We have more experience. So now it's like a flower. Think of it as a flower. If you have a little flower bud, it's small. It's a beautiful flower, but it's small and it hasn't opened. But as time goes on, the flower begins to open more and more and more. And it's like that in most of our job experiences or ministry experiences, is we don't always get to do, when we're really young, all that we'll get to do later. But we can start. We can start. Okay, so strengths are things you're born with. They're talents. They're things you're naturally good at. We've said they're energizing. They're satisfying. Well, what about other things? You see, there are other things that you may be good at, but they are skills that you've improved. I just shared with you about piano. I can tell you, I am not naturally good with music. I am not naturally good at the piano. For one thing, my hands are too small. And so when I stretch my hands out as far as I can barely make an octave. Usually pianists have nice long fingers. They can reach far on the piano. I couldn't. So it was very hard for me. Well, I practiced for 6 years and I gained some skills, but you see, that was something I was working hard at to do well, but it wasn't a natural talent. So if you have something you are working on to try to gain a skill, or it's an ability that you're working on, that's not the sign. We're going to talk more about the things we work on to improve. But for right now, I just want you to understand that there's a difference between that natural ability that you have and something that maybe you're wanting to be good at. Or it's an ability you're working on. Or spiritual gifts from God. Well, we're going to talk about that separately. So those are not the sign, okay? So the strengths we're talking about, the strengths that you're going to work on your homework tonight, those are things that are natural to you, that you feel like I was good even when I was a little kid. It's a natural strength. So let me give you a handout on your natural strengths. There you go, Kevin. I think there's 3 there. So your sheet looks like this up here. And it lists some just to get you thinking, okay? So if you have a strength, let's say you have a strength in building things, then you can just check that box. So these are some things that will help you to think, am I good at that? If you're not, don't tick it, okay? If you are, make a check mark. But then there's lots of extra lines because this will also, you may think of other things. Again, I want you to think of what you've been successful with and what do you enjoy and what do other people say you're good at. If it's not on this list, then write it down here. Okay?